Welcome to the Origin K9 podcast, where we speak to authentic and inspiring voices from the working canine world. Listen to this episode, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media, and go to origink9.com. Enjoy the show. G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Origin K9 podcast. So today we've got our first active member of the Australian Defence Force. We've got Royal Australian Air Force K9 handler / capability manager, Cheryl Chaffey. So there you go.
Hey, how you going?
Yeah, hopefully the bloody feed thing doesn't slow down like it did with Pat and there's a delay. But it would, like I said before, it wouldn't be a podcast if there wasn't some sort of like technical issue or a fucking audio issue or something. So
Yep. I may have a dog that comes and interrupts from time to time too, so apologies for that.
that's fine. It's a dog podcast. It's all good.
Yep. Retired military working dog, he's still a little bit ADHD, so
Oh, what's her name?
her name's Sandy. She was never operational, she's just she bounced around for a while, had her as a baby, and she's a bit of a problem child, and so she's home with us now.
Yeah, nice. Like, did you handle her, or she was like a pool dog and then?
Yeah, no, so I had her as a mentor dog and as a baby because she came back from a lot of foster carers because she was a little bit on the high end. And while I had her down in Adelaide, my current working dog was identified as being deaf, pretty much, in both ears, worse in one than the other, which I knew, right? But he was very well trained. We had a good relationship. Basically, they told me that I couldn't work him going forward from that point. And I had to reteam with her. She was only maybe 13 months at the time. And really young, but exceptional tracking dog, super tracking dog, great with detection stuff. I didn't think she was quite ready on the aggression level at that stage, but definitely great tracking dog. So, reteamed with her and hit the ground running. She did about 3 exercises in the 1 year and just rocked it. The boys all loved her because she achieved all her objectives every time we go out. So lots of fun. But then I got sent to the school, so I had to hand her off to another handler, and she bounced around and had a few issues and got a little bit handler aggressive. And we got her back to the school and been babysitting her basically. She went out as a pool dog for a little while. And but she needs a lot of attention, so ultimately we thought it was better to retire her, so here she is.
Is she a Mallee? I can't see her on the screen.
Yeah, she's a male. Sandy, come here.
Get on up there. Get on.
No, she's not. Yeah, a little bit of a head there, but she's hardly got any teeth left, so she had a little bit of cage aggression, so she's wrecked a few teeth, so.
That's shit ass. Yeah, okay. Well, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Let's I want to go back into your I want to go back to your childhood, talk about your early days and then leading up to you joining the military and some of that early stuff in your military career, if you don't mind taking us through when you were younger and your influences and whatnot.
So, childhood was ordinary, I guess. Pretty ordinary, normal schooling. I actually left school really early, so my parents split up pretty early. They didn't have an amazing relationship. I don't think they liked each other very much, so that's going to affect you growing up a bit. But so ultimately, I went into. We had dogs always quite early, and ultimately I left home pretty early. I think I went off to my first job when I was 14, 15, working with horses. Yep. So I jumped into that way. So whilst I'd always had dogs growing up, I went the horse route and training, breaking, all that sort of stuff. Went through the racehorse riding, race work, and all that sort of stuff. And then got just boots and all in, right? It was all in. So living, working, all that sort of stuff with horses, breaking, training, through the eventing, show jumping sort of thing, and then high-end dressage horses at the end. So. Which I think has really helped me because obviously you get a really good work ethic. It's really hard work, and you learn about training from the beginning. So, and I know a lot of the troops that we get coming through as dog handlers, if they had that background in some sort of, outdoorsy type stuff, but particularly the horsey people, they were a lot easier to assimilate into the dog handler lifestyle. So yeah,
Yeah.
um,
So,
so did that, yeah.
sorry, just I just want to. Where did you grow up? Where was this? Which state?
So I'm from Victoria. So yeah, AFL girl. Um, and and we moved around a lot, yeah, because Dad changed jobs a lot. So I moved around a lot, but I think I ended up mostly around the Yarra Valley area, around that sort of part of the world, which is awesome. And yeah, but so did all of that. That was great. Horse life was great, and worked a little bit in hospitality as well because it's not always a very high paying job. Um, and then had sort of some significantly ordinary relationship that broke down, which led to me moving into other areas and ultimately into defence. So, yeah.
All right.
Mm,
Now, I hope you don't mind. I want to unpack a couple of things in there that you
yeah.
mentioned. Um, first off, you left home really young, like 14. Is that because of the like the home dynamics with your parents?
Yeah, I think so. And look, obviously my parents split up, so it was expected that I'd go and live with mum. And I mean, I wasn't young enough to make that decision, right? But I felt the need to go and look after my dad, I've always been a fairly strong-willed kind of human. um, so I used to run away from home a lot, and I'd go to Dad's and look after him a bit. But yeah, look, ultimately there just wasn't a lot of stability there, I guess, in the human side of my world. And Mum ended up going off her way, and Dad went off with his new life, and I went off with mine, I guess. So just found a little bit more. Uh, it was easier to relate to the animals, I guess.
Yeah.
Training horses was a little bit easier to do and a little bit more consistent. So yeah.
And how do you get into the horse stuff? Because without being facetious, there's the crazy horse girl sort of stereotype. I don't know if that's just a
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
thing
yeah.
or whatever,
And I
but
was never that, right? I never had the high income that, with the pony club type, yeah. So, no, so I started weekend work at a Western place, actually. So I started off at trail riding place. He was actually a dealer. He used to buy in horses and, I've got a whingy German Shepherd outside too, sorry. Um, um, so yeah, trail rides and breaking and training and reselling horses, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, weekend job, which turned into a part-time job, doing it after school as well. And then the first job I got moving away from home was a live-in job on a quarter horse stud, preparing horses for competitions and shows and stuff. So
shit.
yeah, yeah.
And what was your role during that time? Were you just sort of like, because you were so young, were you just like volunteering, animal husbandry sort of stuff, or were you like, hey, teach me how to break a horse, how to train it, ride it, that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I was doing lots of the riding, and from the beginning, started demonstrating the horses, right? So people had come to look at the horses, so which was a bit hairy back in the day because we'd be getting horses from the sale yards, and they're all there for a reason generally, right? So yeah, you learn to ride pretty quickly because they are pretty hairy horses.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so and then leading the trail rides and stuff like that, taking people out to have a nice pleasant day and that sort of thing, but essentially also looking after the horses too, the husbandry side of it, and um, getting them looking presentable as well as caring for them day to day and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so who's buying the horses? If you're showing them doing, obviously the ride part is like a service for the
Yeah,
everyday
so
person, I guess, but
yeah, so back then this guy was kind of, ahead of his time, right? So he was one of the first that had come out with the finance option, right? This was quite a while ago, obviously. So he had a finance option. So you could come in and you could see the horse you liked, and he'd do all the paperwork for you then and there to get finance on these horses. So he was targeting your kids, your anyone that was interested. So he was advertising quite extensively. And yeah, so normal people, they weren't all wealthy people because they didn't need to be. But I think that, that in itself had holes in it because buying a horse is always a cheap option, right? It's tick part of it. It's looking after them that's the expensive bit. So
Yeah.
yeah,
100%.
yeah. But then we moved into the higher end. Like I was working, as I said, I finished up working for a woman, a Danish lady, beautiful lady. Still keep in touch with her. Who was riding FEI level, so Olympic level training, not at the Olympics, but that standard of dressage test. And so we got all the, the Turak ladies and that sort of thing that used to come and adjust their horses and send them to us for training and that sort of thing. So, yeah, total different side of the world.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Now, talk me through the braking part. Is that, I mean, I'm sure I've got my own preconceived notions about what that is based on some fucking cowboy TV show or like Yellowstone or something. Is
Yeah.
that what it's like? You get a wild horse and you're just like, let's break him in, boys, and we just run around the ring, or what's that like? What do you do?
Look, back in the day, it was a lot. It was a lot like that, and now it's a lot more like with the horses, where we do lots of work before we start, before we get on them. Yeah, so you're doing lots of groundwork and all that sort of stuff, and you're actually training the horse. You're not just um, using avoidance training, right, or trying to outlast the horse and teach them that just put up with this until until you're too exhausted not to, and then you'll figure out that it's not so bad, sort of thing. So a total different mindset, I suppose, about breaking and training now. But there was a flip side of that, the same as there is with dogs. So one of the guys I worked for, he used to get sent a lot of the horses that were banned from the racetrack. And of course, they needed to demonstrate retraining before they were allowed back in the barriers because they were dangerous, right? And some of those horses you'd have to be you'd have a little bit stronger conversations with them, should we say, because you'd have to get them back on track, literally back on track in a short period of time, because, it's a lot of money involved in these sorts of horses. So, yeah, interesting. It was an interesting knockabout life.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a. I wouldn't call it. I don't know if this is just my idea. I wouldn't call it a big industry, but it's definitely a niche industry. So I'm sure that if you go deep in the horse world, you probably make a fair bit of cash getting in the races, that type of stuff.
Yeah, you could definitely. And I got to a point where it was like I needed my own facility though, right? Because I was going around and working for a lot of other people, but I don't think I was very organised in myself at that time, and I had this crazy mindset that I didn't want to earn the money from what I loved doing, right? I did it because I loved it, and because I was, you know, and I always think of myself, even now in the dogs, right? I'm always a student. I'm always learning, right? You never sit there and think of yourself as an expert or, you know, yeah, you're always learning. So I guess I've always got that mindset. So,
Yeah. And what about, because I imagine there's a fair bit of danger too working with those large horses. Um, any sort of close calls or injuries or anything like that?
oh yeah, well, actually, I was just talking about it the other night because talking about a friend who's just started playing rugby, and talking about an ankle injury, and I'm like, yeah. So I've had several injuries, but probably the most significant was stepping off one of the horses, and I've shattered both of the bones in my lower leg, ripped all the ligaments in my ankle. That was kind of all, and but I was wearing leather boots at the time, knee high leather boots, and I'd gotten those sent over from England, right? They were measured, they were custom made for me, and I was like, there's no way, you're not cutting these off me, right? So I had like three people, these two chicks doing Lamar's breathing with me, right? While we had the farrier there, the guy that does the horse's feet, and he was actually like easing the boot off my leg. I'm like, we're not cutting these off, right? So managed to get them off, so that was pretty good. And got that all surgery. Obviously, it was surgery, and I think I was back at the property because I actually lived at work. I was living where I worked at the indoor school and everything, and I had fiberglass tape around my plaster because I was sort of back in the stables and annoying my boss, going, "Oh, come on!" So she'd give me one of those. She goes, "Just go down on the back end, all right? I don't want to see." So, yeah. So that was fun.
Yeah.
That was pretty significant. And it's pretty amazing how quickly bones heal, right? Yeah. Because I remember saying there wasn't even a straight line on my x-ray because I splintered everything. And then within a couple of weeks, it was starting, a few weeks. I think the first one was after 3 or 4 weeks. You got solid lines again. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
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 And so that was the worst one, you reckon?
I think it's the most significant actual injury. Yeah, I mean, I've had heaps of falls and stuff. That's part of it. Horses coming down on top of you, and you're just lucky that you kind of you're not directly under the weight and things like that. But yeah, that would be the most significant injury I think from the horses. So,
Yeah, hectic. Because I'm not a big horse guy or anything, but I've been around a few over the years, and
yeah,
I wouldn't say I'm intimidated by them, but I'm extremely wary. I'm like, you're a big, friendly looking thing, but man, you just like one kick and you like snap my knee in half or something, So I've always been had a healthy respect for the horses. Like a mate of
yeah,
mine had a couple of horses. I never got on the bloody thing, but I was just like, I'll just pat your beautiful head and I'll stay away from your massive, strong legs.
yeah. No, they're pretty impressive, but I think we've got to have a healthy respect for all the critters, really. I'm aware of a cow though than I'm of a horse. I can't read them like I can a horse because they're
Yeah.
yeah.
And so the training component of the horses, I know I'm like hyper fixated on these horses because it's interesting to me. What sort of training are you doing with a horse? And then did that help you later on with dogs or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I say, initially it was quite basic, and I think that was just the nature of the people that we were around and what they were doing. But in the end, as I say, I got quite obsessed with dressage because it's very finite. Now, there's a lot of physiological stuff involved in that, like that you have to be physically fit to do the work. But it's still also training, right? We do lots of work on the ground and we train lots of exercises, and it's same, right? You get the horse to offer a behaviour. We funnel them into the right shape. We've got the assistance of a rein and legs and weight and all that sort of stuff. But we're funneling them into a make the choice for the behaviour that we want. And then we can reward that either by releasing or physically rewarding, right? We can stop and reward them with a paddle, with a treat, or something like that. So quite similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's kind of somewhere in between shaping and like a really gentle compulsion thing.
Yeah. And it's the same. It's the same as with the dog world now. You look out, and everyone's got their different, ism and the way they do things. It's the same in the horse world. There's people that do just the shaping stuff, and everyone has their own little niche thing of what they're doing. So, but ultimately, training is training, and I think I get quite obsessed about that in that the way a being learns, right, us included, it's the same. It's the same. There's variables as in size and capacity to learn, right? Capacity to make decisions, but learning is learning. So we all learn the same way. So
Yeah, exactly. All
yeah.
right. And then so how do you then transition from the horse stuff into the military? And what year did you join?
So oh wait,
Okay, 2008.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so the dog stuff was because I had dogs prior to, but back in that day, because my mum's a obedience trainer and judge and all that sort of stuff, but it was with German Shepherds and back in the compulsion days, right? It was very much compulsion-based training, which was super similar to when I came in, right? It's we were still using the Keeler method of training dogs and that sort of thing, which is a lot of compulsion avoidance-based training. And I think already when I came in, though, I'm like, I could understand it, but you still knew there was a better way, right? And you could get better choices from the dog by going a different way. And I think ultimately what kind of proves that to me now is that especially in a working dog, we want them to make the choice to be between us and the bad stuff, right? Or to go into a bad situation because we send them into it. They have to choose to do that. If I force them to do everything to get there, when push comes to shove, I don't trust they're going to make the decision to do it just because they've done lots of reps in practice. Because I believe in the emotional capability of a dog, and I want them to choose it. And you see it. You see dogs that put their heart and soul into protecting a person. Everyone thinks their dog's going to protect them. You know what? If it gets really hard, they'll have that instinct, but when it gets really hard, they're not. They're going to protect themselves. Whereas I think if we've done this the right way, the training, we can get them to that stage. It's not just genetics. I think we can get them to make that choice. So I think it's really important. We want these big, tough, hard dogs, but I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful and genuine in how we go about preparing them. So.
Yeah, interesting that you frame it like that, because I remember when I was doing pet training, people, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, that people are always like, he's really protective of me, and I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah,
that's pretty rare to be really protective. I was chatting with Pat Stewart in the last episode about protection dogs. It's extremely rare to get that dog.
Yeah, 100%. And look, and a lot of what we do, mostly we'll say in the sport world, is making the dogs think that they're a lot stronger than they are, right? I think if we're careful with the dogs in development, we can get them over those hurdles though, right? Like in young dogs, it's natural they're going to be a little bit hesitant in different situations. And I think the way that we go about getting them over that hurdle is really important, because it's the difference between a dog just doing it and not being sure about it, or putting it off completely, to a dog actually thinking, oh yeah, I can do this, right? And once you open that door up, and you only have to do it a few times, and then they have that attitude that they can overcome stuff. And once they're at that stage, I think that then you can start developing a strong dog, right? So, yeah.
So just winding back a little bit to first joining the military, joining the RAAF. So why did you join the RAAF?
Look, I've always been looking at military, and I think I was actually looking at the Army initially. And then I went into recruiting, and they said that I could go, RAAF was the only place I could go direct entry in dogs, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, right? I was in a pretty ordinary spot in my life. As I said, I had a pretty hectic relationship that was really hard to extricate myself from.
Do you mind expanding on that, or is that something you just want to leave?
Expanding. It was a pretty ordinary relationship that went on for a really long time, and yeah, even after I joined the military, it was still trying to reach out and grab me back, and it's like getting away, joining an organisation like the Defence Force. I was able to escape that life, I guess. So I think a lot of my emotional stuff and mental issues that I was having, I escaped into the RAAF. So whereas other people have their issues as a result of being in defence, I think this was a little bit of a safe haven for me coming in. So,
yeah, awesome. Right, yeah. So obviously, yeah, you're in a bad situation, looking to do something to get out of that world. And I guess it's a hop, skip, and a jump from horses to dogs, right?
Well, defence, when I went into recruiting, they sort of, laid out sort of some options for me. They do your testing to see where you sort of fit in and what you could do. And they said, well, dog handler, you could come into security forces and you could go direct entry as a dog handler. I went, yep, no, that's it. You meant to give them 3 choices of what you want to do, and you come in. I went, yep, dog handler, a military working dog handler, and a dog handler. So, so yeah, that was it. That was all. Once that was kind of narrowed down for me, I was like, yeah, no, that's it. That's what I was looking for. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So then you do. I was about to say Kapuka, that's Army. So you do Air Force basic training. And then you've got your initial employment training, which I imagine is just straight into the dogs.
No, so back when I joined, we were still policing as well. And so we did our rookies, and then we went, and I was one of the first lot to go through Wagga, the new, like, well, it's not new now, but it was new then. So I did my basic rookies at Wagga, and then we went to Holsworthy. We did tri-service police training down at Holsworthy, which was heaps of fun as well. So and really good fun because the Wotu that was running it, he was into martial arts and stuff like that. And prior to me coming in, I'd started doing some kickboxing and stuff, so I was doing a bit of Muay Thai and everything. So yeah, we got along really well because the way he structured all of the OST type training and stuff was along those lines. So yeah, it was really enjoyable. I had heaps of fun actually at Holsworthy. And then from Holsworthy, then we came up to the RAAF and we did RAAF specific police training. And then from there we went and did dog course.
Awesome. Now, obviously, 2008, 9, 10, which this was kind of happening around, that was very operational for the Australian Army. Did that ever sort of go into your head, like maybe go to Iraq or Afghanistan? Because obviously Holsworthy had 4 RAR back in the day, but it would have been then 2 Commando later. Was that something you ever sort of considered, thought about, had brushes with?
Yeah, look, always. And I mean, I did actually get I did get put up for one of the Middle East rotations, but I also got Timor at the same time. And my BSECO at the time was well aware that I'd much rather go at posting a deployment with my dog. And so he didn't even actually tell me about the Middle East deployment. He put me up for the Timor one. So he told me about the other one afterwards, which would have been more money and all that sort of stuff and going to the Middle East. But he's right. I definitely wouldn't have wanted to leave my dog behind. And back then, and even now, Timor was pretty much the only deployment that a dog handler could get with their dog. Otherwise, we'd be going without a dog. So
Yeah. So what year did you go to Timor?
So that was 2012.
Oh, hectic, 2012. Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So talk me through, sorry, so there's a bit of a gap there as well. So you would have joined 2008. When did you finish training and then you were like qualified canine handler?
Yeah, so I was posted to Darwin in 2009. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you just expand on the role as well of the names changed, so I'm going to get this wrong, security forces, SecPol.
Yeah. We're back to security forces now. So
Yay!
back then we were, I think we were SecPol. We were security police back then. We had the badge and everything. So we were we were after hours. We were 24 hours. So we were shift work. So we did all the policing and security on the base. Darwin, which is where I was posted to, and I spent quite a few years in Darwin actually. It's a non-headquarters base, so we sort of avoid some of the stuff. We didn't have a resident flying unit up there either. We were transitional, so we'd get aircraft coming from Adelaide, and they'd stop off in Darwin, and they had hangars in Darwin, and then they'd go out and do their patrolling from there. And obviously people coming back or going out to exercises or deployments would usually come through Darwin. So security of the aircraft when they were there, general security of the base, and of course policing of the base as well.
Yeah. So does the things happen that you guys actually respond to, or is it pretty routine, mostly training sort of stuff?
So mostly trespassers and stuff like that. We not a whole lot of issues while I was there as aircraft related. We had a few big high profile activities happen. We'd have the President of the United States come through and all that sort of stuff. So that's a lot of heaps of security and whatnot coming through there. Big dog circus pony, but so yeah, lots of that sort of stuff, lots of exercises that come through. But most of the stuff we'd get would be some domestic stuff, like in the lines. Some of it was not so good. You'd get some people that were, like suicidal. You'd get some people that were just having some emotional issues, just interpersonal issues. But predominantly from a security point of view would be trespassers, people jumping the fence and, coming in for whatever reason. So,
You mean
yeah.
like idiot AJs that have forgotten their ID and they've got a skin full of piss?
Yeah, look, usually they get on, but yeah, sometimes, and then escorting them from the gate or the issues at the front gate when, the AJs had got dropped off at the wrong base because the taxi driver had just dropped them off at the closest base. We were closer than Robbo Barracks, so they'd stop at our base just to get them out of the vehicle, and they'd get aggressive because they'd be like, well, this isn't our base, right? So, yeah, so a bit of that sort of stuff too.
Yeah. And because you've obviously got your dog with you, every incident you respond to, the dog's there on hip or in the car?
The dog would always be in the vehicle at a minimum, yeah. I'd get my dog out a lot. I think a lot of people are aversive to doing that. But being a fairly smaller statured female, it would depend on the situation though, right? So, but if it was definitely a situation where I needed a show of force, I'd have my escalation of force close at hand if I needed it. So, yeah. But,
Yeah, nice.
but going back to what you were saying, there were ebbs and flows in the workload at Darwin, and I think that's why I loved it so much, was because it was Darwin, so it's a different lifestyle up there. So there was it was quite common that people would be coming in off shift to be doing extra dog work and stuff, and after hours the base was our responsibility. That also meant we had all of that area to train and play in. So I was really fortunate that I think I got that as my first posting and got to extend there for a few years, because I got a lot of training done, and it was great. And a lot of troops coming up underneath you, you can't help but influence. And so the guys coming up underneath me, they sort of had the same enthusiasm. And I was lucky. I mean, when I first got to Darwin, I think had the likes of Ben Gertz was there. So he was always a great sounding board and really good at pushing you that little bit too. So, I think when you start with that sort of standard, that you're only going to go forward from there. So.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's awesome. Because I imagine you'd have a fair bit of autonomy too, right? And being like spec pole with the dog, they probably didn't understand most of what you do anyway. They were just like, go over there, be a dog person.
Pretty much. And pretty much after hours, they were happy to sort of hand off, responsibility of everything to us anyway. And, you're dealing with lots of insecurities on buildings and things like that. That was a pretty common thing. We were left alone to do what we needed to do most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Any standout incidents? Because I mean, obviously, probably most of what you're responding to, like you said, is like welfare staff, interpersonal problems, bit of mental health. Like any standout ones for you?
Not so much in Darwin, really. I mean, a little bit. Dogs being really proving their worth in their tracking ability, right? You get the dog is someone was seen jumping the fence, or they saw them on the highway and they knew they were on the base somewhere. So we go and locate, and we prove the dog's tracking quite a lot. As in, you'd find the start point, and you'd find where they'd gone and where they ended up. So, but back then and even now to a larger extent, it's you take them into hand, and then you're handing them off, right? So handing them off to CFO usually. So yeah.
I mean, it's still pretty cool. Like you did like real life tracks, right? You track from the fence or whatever it is to, like, I don't know, they would have gone to lines or try to break into the fucking Afghans facility or something.
Yeah, or often they're trying to get away from something. They've already committed a crime somewhere else, and they're trying to get away. They're just trying to get off the highway. So they think the coming through the Defence Force base is going to be a safer option for them. So yeah,
wrong.
Wrong.
Yeah. Do you ever get any bites?
No, not there. No.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. People's memories they come fairly clear after a little while when they know that they're going to get handed over to the police anyway, oh no, I'm so hot, I don't remember my name, and then their memory comes back fairly quickly once you know that they're cornered and that they're going to get handed over to the police anyway. So
Yeah. Do you ever go out on the town with the cops as well? Because I know in Townsville, for example, the MPs would go out with the state cops on what was it, Flinders Street and Palmer Street and stuff. Do you ever do that?
no, so we went and did without dogs. We went and did some patrolling with them, and we did have them coming because they ran a couple of courses while we were there. So we had them come onto the base to use our areas for their tracking, training and assessing and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We were working towards that. I was also looking because I was really, really passionate about trying to get a search and rescue capability. I wanted to get some of our dogs certified as search and rescue. And that was probably stronger when I got back from Timor, flying around with the guys and they're going, we would much rather pick your dogs up and fly them out than the civvy dogs that they're using. Because I'm thinking our dogs are trained to do all of this, right? They're trained to track. They're trained to find people. And we can make it safe by muzzling the dogs. And as you know, Darwin is a pretty hairy place for people going missing quite often, But, yeah, and initially we got the green light for that, but actually getting that through and getting that signed off proved to be a little bit difficult. I think there were a few political gates there that people weren't prepared to cross, so which was a shame because, I thought it made sense in my head that, that we do that because we've got this capability right here. But anyway, it didn't happen. So.
Yeah. So take us forward to Timor. Tell me about what was happening in Timor at that time. Because
Yeah.
I never went to Timor, so I know 99 and then 2006, and that's about all I really know of Timor. So what was going on in 2012?
Yeah, so 2012, we ended up being the last rotation there. So which was kind of funny because even whilst I was there, we got locked down on base quite a few times, right? There'd be a little bit of unrest going on outside and they'd be like, it's not safe for, let's just lock down on base. Basically, they were trying to withdraw, though, right? They're trying to withdraw any assistance, any Australian assistance, and get the Timorese standing on their own 2 feet, making their own decisions and that sort of stuff. So we were winding down. So when I got there, we were patrolling the base, keeping the army assets, essentially. We had the Black Hawks there full time. So doing lots of AMEs and that sort of stuff out to the islands, pregnant villages and that sort of thing. Doing lots of engagement. So we'd be patrolling still outside with the dogs and that sort of stuff. But more just definitely a peacekeeping role. So, yeah.
So I imagine when you went outside the wire, you would have gone out with the army guys, just like embedded in their patrols, or?
We'd go out in small patrols of our own. As I said, it's peacekeeping, so the threat was deemed low when I was over there. So yeah, it was really just certainly weren't needing to keep that much control when we were out there. It was really just being present. So yeah.
Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah, like I said, I've never really had much to do with Timor. I never really knew what the situation was over there, and especially the geopolitical dynamics. Who's who in the zoo and what the tensions were caused by. Like I have a very vague understanding, but yeah. Okay, so the last trip, was there an infantry unit there?
It was predominantly army over there. So where I was at one of the I was actually just behind the airport, which was a new base that was put there. Essentially, we were just there with the Black Hawks. There are about three bases though around Timor. I'm not even sure what unit was out there predominantly, because our main role was security of the Black Hawks and of the base where we were. I know the Kiwis were there. We did a great actual training exercise with the Kiwis while we were there as well. They built a kill house in the middle of nowhere, so we sort of flew in. We had 3 different scenarios going on, and they incorporated the dogs. So that was a heap of fun. Actually, it was a really good exercise. But other than that, lots of training and stuff that we were doing while we were over there. The Timorese are a interesting sort of people. They're lovely people, but they go from 0 to 100 in no time. I know there was an accident while we were over there, and I'm not sure if it was a UN or AFP. One woman had hit one of the locals on a bike. They were riding on their moped, and no shoes, nothing. That's how they ride around over there. But knocked him off the bike, and the kids hit the curb, and he wasn't in a good way, right? And all the locals have sort of swarmed around, and it was a big thing. And of course, getting quite aggressive towards the driver. So we kind of moved her out of the way. There was myself and two other AVSEC doggies that were over there as well. So my main effort was to try and treat the kid who was on the ground and unconscious, seemingly unconscious, and whilst the guys were trying to keep control of the crowd, because that was ebbing in. Once we got the driver out of the way, then they turned their attention onto us, and they were concerned about the kid, and they kept pushing us to try and take the kid. They said, you have to take them to hospital, you have to take them to hospital. And I'm like, we can't do that, right? That's not our remit. But I was trying to just tend to this kid, right? Give him some basic first aid, and he started losing more and more consciousness as we're sitting there. I'm like, where's this ambulance, right? We called the ambulance, and when the ambulance finally turned up, I understood why they were stressing so much about us taking the kid to the ambulance, because it was just a van that rocked up with a driver. And they kind of just, come in and they've looked at the kid and like, we're looking after his head and keeping his spine straight, right? Because he's hit the ground in a weird way, losing consciousness, like he wasn't in a good way. He's basically just scooped him up and sort of shoved him in the back of the van and shut the doors. And we're thinking, oh man, yeah. And so that was that situation. And then they kind of all dissipated and it was fine. But it was quite interesting how quickly they went from being about their own business to like bang, in this like very intense group of people that weren't exactly sure what should be happening, but we should have been doing it for them. Like wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what happened to the kid?
I actually don't think he made it. But yeah. So the hospital system over there wasn't great either. We had our own medical stuff when we were there. Which I did need to use because so I was volunteering. There was a little vet surgery not far from where we were as well, and it was interesting. Obviously, everywhere we'd go outside of the base, you'd have to have an escort with you. You couldn't just go off on your own. And I was volunteering at this vet surgery, and the vet was great. He's a really, really amazing guy. He put a heap of the young kids that were like local kids through vet school. Like he'd send them off to train and stuff. And he had them all working in the surgery. And he did a lot for the street dogs. Everyone had just dropped dogs off him, right? You can imagine the street dog situation over there was fairly intense. But we had this one dog in particular that was pretty aggressive, right? And so towel over the head to try and catch him to sedate him in the first place. And normally we'd give them their initial sedation outside, and then we'd move them inside onto the table. Because ketamine, they have a vomit reaction sometimes if they're. So we wait for them to be relaxed and all that sort of stuff. For some reason, the vet was in a fair hurry this day, so he wanted to get the dog inside. And so we've taken him in. He's sitting on the table. The vet's got the towel over his head, but the dog's vomited, right? So I've just gone to thinking that the guy had a better hold on him than he did. And so I've just gone to wipe out underneath him. The dog's tagged my hand. And I've looked over at my escort, and there was a basin behind me, so I've just sort of rinsed it off and shaken my hand off because we've already sedated this dog, right? We had to keep the ball rolling in this. But I looked at my escort, who was, I think he was my corporal at the time. I was only in LAC then, and he's gone white, thinking, oh no, rabies, we're in Timor, and I'm just, hold on, let's get on with this, right? So got through the surgery. Long story short, I ended up having to go to hospital and get rabies shots in my finger. So, but that was through our medical, or army medical, I should say. So, yeah.
If she,
Yeah.
that sounds like medical work was sort of, I wouldn't say the priority, but like probably the bulk of the experience that you had over there, right?
A lot. So yeah, a lot of the jobs that were going out were AME. So because even when we were locked down, the base would be locked down and nobody was allowed to leave. We'd still go out on AMEs because there's lots of little islands around the place, and mostly were pregnant women. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Any of that medical stuff ever sort of affect you in any sort of way? Is it something you ever dwelled on, or is it just like it was just part of what I was there for and I accept it?
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, I was having this conversation with someone recently too, and I said, look, if I had my time over, I think I would have gone paramedics. You know what I mean? That sort of, I'm good in that sort of stuff. I'm not great in the, they're there, the anxiety attack and, but in actual crisis stuff, because I've been not involved, but I've been first on scene to a lot of catastrophic vehicle accidents and stuff like that. Involving, mums and kids and, a guy that was, splattered all over the road and trying to crawl up my arms and stuff. I'm like, dude, you got to stay still, right?
What was this in Timor?
No. This was before I even joined. But
Jesus.
just to illustrate lots of serious crises incidents like that don't kind of bother me that much. Yeah, it's where people have a choice and they make shitty choices that probably bothers me more than, the result of something like that. So yeah, no, the medical stuff was fine. No real issues with that. Yeah.
Yeah, good. And do you think that's because you probably had in the back of your mind, here's some potential scenarios I could run into, or was it just a training thing, or you think it's just part of who you are and your previous experience with car crashes and things like that?
I think a lot of it is who I am, but I mean, I always default to probably a bit of a training as well. But I have that sort of mindset of let's get it done, and if you can, you should. And not everybody is strong-minded enough. You see everybody falling apart, right? It's like let's focus on what needs to get done. We can fall apart later, right? And you do, right? You'll have the hysterical laughing fit after you've had some catastrophic event or whatever, or you'll just sort of sit there and be, but at the time, it's deal with what is, right? You have to. And I think the horses and the dogs have probably helped with that a lot too, right? Because you have an incident, you got to deal with it. You can't sit there and wait. You got to deal with it. Horses caught in a fence, or a dog fight, or someone's getting chewed by a dog. You got to deal with it. You can't sort of, oh no, blood. You got to deal with what is and prioritize straight away. Hysterical person. It's like, no, well, you do that. You hold that. Let's do this. So, yeah, it's just getting the job done, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point, right? Because you're like in the moment, you're like, this is what we do. We're going to take care of this thing, and then later they'll fall apart thing. I think that's where a lot of people do come apart because they may or may not be great in that initial scenario, but it's the processing later on that they can't quite put things in boxes. They can't reconcile something. So it sounds like that's something that you've not had to deal with, which is good, which is really good.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%, and I agree with that. And seeing a lot of people that don't, and they have the self-doubt and all that sort of stuff, and everybody does, nobody's perfect, and we all think, oh wow, gee, I could have done that differently or whatever. But at the end of the day, you've got to believe that everybody's doing the best that they can right now with what they've got. And when we know better, we do better. And that's the way. That's the only way we can kind of look at it, right? It's you did the best that you could at the time with what you had. Yeah, could have done it differently. Yeah, I could have made a different decision. But that's probably the biggest thing I'd say to all my troops, right? Especially being in a security forces role where you do have to take control of people. You're not always gonna have all the answers. You're not always gonna know the right thing, I suppose. You've had your training and you know your left and right of arc, but just make a decision. Just do something. Do something. we can fix it later. We can change the decision, right? We can change it, but do something now. Don't just sit there and wait for the situation to take over. Do something now. If it's wrong, okay, that's fine. But we can only hope that with our personal qualities and the training that we've had, that we're going to make the best decision that we can in that moment. So,
Yeah, and I think indecision kills, right?
yeah.
Awesome. So post Timor, how long was that trip, by the way?
So because we were winding up, we were there for a little bit longer, so probably about 8 months, 7-8 months. I think.
Oh shit, that's
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair chunk of time. Did you have a rockle?
Yeah. So I came home. Actually, I came home in the middle of that and went back to Holsworthy because I think we had Franco Angelino come down and did his decoy course. That was that year. And so I had I paid for myself to do that one, and I took the bitch that I had at the time down there and did that. And that was a good course because we had the likes of Ben and Jace Kelly and Grant Rival and Panda and Macca and so we had a really good group of people down on that one. So yeah,
Nice. At Holsworthy, so obviously, Supermondo wouldn't have had dogs at that time. Did you ever work with SF at all?
No, I haven't. I didn't go over there, so no, I haven't gone over there. I know a few of the guys, and a few of the Rappies have gone over and done the DLO position over there, and come back and worked with them. But no, I haven't.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're a sicko though. You're sick for it. On your leave, go and pay for some decoy course in Sydney.
As I say, when I do something, I kind of do it, and it's like, I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity, right? I knew it was coming up, and they had me on the list, and then they're like, they didn't think I was going to get back on Rockall to do it, and plus, I think they couldn't get approval because technically you're assigned, right, when you're away, and it was through defence that it was happening. So I thought, screw it. Okay, so I ended up and I went and put my name down. I paid for myself to go. And that was great experience, really good for the dog I had at the time because she was a bit of a crackle, so it's good to take her down there. And that was good because I think from there fell out the new decoy package that we rolled out in the RAAF for training our handlers. So that was, I think it was a pretty important one to kind of get in on. I didn't know at the time that that's what was going to happen, but that is what happened. We kind of RAAFified it a little bit, but it's essentially the steps that he used for training his decoys, which is a lot of drills and stuff without the dog, which is so important, right? And I still do lots of that with my decoys and with my helpers, even with the sport dog world and all the other training that I do outside of defence. Really important that you learn to control your own body before you start thinking about what you're doing with the dog, and then understand the psychology of what you're doing. Then we'll bring the dog in because there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, Mike. We were chatting before we started recording. Mike Nesbitt had an interesting take on that. He was just talking about progressions, and because I was asking him about fear, and he was just talking about getting the fear out, getting some repetitions in before you start throwing some dogs in the equation. So it sounds like you do something probably similar.
Yeah, and I was listening to that chat that you had with him, and in all aspects, because he said that you bring the dog in and they forget everything you've said, and it's not just that aspect, it's the training aspect too, right? So when you're doing just your training with the dog, you put a lead in their hand and everything you've said flies out the window. But from a decoy perspective as well, because they don't know, right? They haven't experienced it before, so they're going to get that. There's a lot of unknown, so they get that the adrenaline and all that sort of stuff. We get those first few bites out of the way, and then we start delving in and digging into unpacking what they need to know, and then we start talking about the psychology and that sort of stuff. But because there's a lot to the decoying stuff. So
yeah. So post Timor, is this what you're doing? You're just like upskilling. Because you went to school at some point as well, right?
Yeah. So I came back from Timor, and still putting a lot of time into my training, right? I was really passionate. I started doing some civvy stuff as well. I started doing, back then, the only Cert 4 that you could do in psychology, animal training, was through the Delta dog course, whatever it was.
Yeah, I'm
So I got
vaguely familiar.
hey,
I said I'm only vaguely familiar with what that is.
yeah,
I've heard the
yeah.
name Delta thrown around, but
So I started doing that course, and I got basically the whole way through it until the last practical session that we were supposed to do, like a 6-day residential or something. But they were very much force free, right? It was all about, positive only training. I'm like, wow, you know, it's that didn't kind of it doesn't work, right? So
or it works
ultimately,
to
I
a point,
thought,
and then it's like
look, there's teach train proof, but even in the teaching phase, right, there has to be some withholding of reward, or little stress point where the dog makes a decision, or there's a little bit of stress in the dog to make them make the right decision, right? So, and I'm not talking about stressing dogs out. It's just how we learn, right? We learn the same way. And I could go all the way into flow state and all that sort of stuff. It's that flow state, which everyone thinks is this nice, nice feeling. And of course it's a nice feeling, but it comes from stress, right? It comes from having a challenge, being challenged, and being so focused and passionate about what you're doing that you work through that and you learn, you overcome that, and then comes the good, and then you challenge yourself that bit more. That's what flow is. You get so involved in what you're doing, and this is where we try and get the dogs. That's the training headspace we want the dogs to be in, that they're invested, that they're choosing, but we're giving them challenges that they can overcome. But to do that, of course, we've had to set up some parameters. We've had to find out what motivates them, and get a good line of communication, reliable communication, a contract, if you will. The dog knows that if I say this, then this is going to happen, right? Or they do this, this is going to happen. And so if we get that line of communication up, the motivation, we know what motivates them. We understand consequences for and for doing and not doing, and all that sort of stuff. Then we can start thinking about this flow state and this really optimum learning state for dogs. And it's in all phases too, right? Everyone thinks, oh yeah, obedience, that's where you do your training. No, it's not. Everything, protection and tracking as well. Because ultimately everything we do with the dog, we're just exploiting what a dog already does, right? We're not teaching the dog to smell stuff. We're not teaching the dog to sit or to down or to stand or to bite. The dog already does that stuff. We're just trying to, we're teaching them to do it on command, for one, and to do it in a specific way, targeting, that sort of thing with their bite work, giving a specific response, right? So we might encourage dogs that aren't vocal to be vocal in their civil work, things like that. And then once we've got them in that state, then we're going to put it on steroids, right? And we're going to amp it up and try and make it more than what it is. But we have to think about the balance in the dogs first. Prey, defense, and social. So social is where the obedience comes in, but it's not obedience. It's where they fit in the pack structure, right? And that's how we get the communication with the dog. So
yeah, it's really timely that how you mentioned the flow state and that optimal level of stress, because I'm listening to an audiobook at the moment for the second time. It's about deep work, and it's
right.
about you've only got X amount of willpower and attention per day, and it's about optimizing that. And then it starts talking about the insulating neural circuits with myelin, like they talk about in Daniel Coyle's the talent code,
Yep.
which is often referenced by Bart Bellin with the
Yep.
NEPO-POSE system. So it's it's so interesting the way you've mentioned that, and it's the book I'm reading, and it's just all so interconnected. So
Yeah.
anyway, very interesting that you mentioned it like that. It just made me just sort of piqued my attention when you said that.
Yeah. It's funny how that happens, that it's like when you start looking at a specific car, then you sort of see that car everywhere. But no, and the myelin and the neural pathways and stuff, it's real stuff, hey? It's real stuff. And that's where we come into issues, I think, with not with training the behaviours. Training the initial behaviours is good. It's retraining stuff, right? When unfortunately dogs are learning all the time, and so the things we let them get away with whilst we're training, they actually become a neural pathway in the dog. And I don't know that we can change that pathway. We have to make a new one, right? So we need to build a new off ramp and make a new pathway, because once that pathway is wrapped, we can't change it, right? We have to make a new one. So yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So obviously you're doing a lot of upskilling in this post Timor time of your career. Um, was the NEPO system out at around that time? I think it would have been.
Yeah. So I think, was I in Darwin? I can't remember if I was in Darwin or if I was in Adelaide at the time. I'd done NEPO's been around for a long time. The initial iteration of NEPO was a lot more nay, definite nay popo. I think was my interpretation. Whereas now it's a lot more, it might be nay, it might be po nay nay nay. It's just
Yeah.
understanding. It's understanding consequence, right, and fitting it in how it works. But so I went and did the last workshop that Bart did over here when Pat brought him out up to Queensland here.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I went and did that. Actually, I might have had this girl then. She might have been a puppy. I might have actually just picked her up that day. I can't remember, or that week. So yeah, I went and did that one. That was at a school, an undercover area at a school they did up here, not far from Amberley actually. So did that one, and thought that was amazing. Great concepts, and learnt some things. He did some specific things with introducing his tracks and his pull sense and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's definitely factored into the upskilling. And I think that's what we do as trainers. We go through and we pick up stuff, and I'm always wary. I always tell everybody I want them to go and experience as many different trainers and stuff as they can, right? People say, I want to go and train with this. But, my first instinct is, yeah, go. But then, unfortunately, a lot of people, they're looking for an easier road. They're looking for an easier way. So they go somewhere and they see a couple of things that pique their interest or that are eye-opening to them, and they change their whole process of doing things, right? Okay, we're doing it this way now. And it's like, your initial concept shouldn't change. You should find things. They might tilt your view or, bring things into focus a little bit better for you. Or they might just be some things that you can change, new things that you can introduce into what you're already doing. So whilst my instinct is to tell everybody, because I'll go to everybody. I'll go and watch anyone train. I honestly believe you can learn from everybody. Not always good stuff, but you can learn from everybody. And then,
Yeah.
hey, look, there's some brilliant trainers out there. I look at some, training brilliant behaviours, and you just sit there and think, wow, that's awesome. Are they replicable in a working dog, right? Holistically, are they replicable, on a trial field? Is it going to stand up to that sort of testing? Maybe not, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they're able to train some really amazing behaviours, right? So you can learn something off everybody, but I think you need to have a very a worldview, right? You need to be able to see everything and where it fits in the world. Don't look at things as, oh, this is the way we do it, or that's the way we do it, because that's how you end up with all these conflicted dogs, right? Because, oh, but we were doing it this way before, now we're doing it this way. You're telling, and they're not getting a clear message of what's right and wrong. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Glenn Cook or Pat Stewart, or maybe it was on the K9 Paradigm Instagram page. They had this meme, and it was these two guys building a wall and this shit fight of a wall, and it was like me and my friend after being to 10 different seminars and trying 10 different methods with my dog, and the dog is the wall.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite poignant, because at the time I was trying my hand at the development stuff, and I could definitely be accused of having done that. I was like, me Popo, Dick Stall, it's got to be Jerry Bradshaw, and then this and this and this, and yeah, I guess it's an easy world to get confused in, right? Because there's just so many different. I think people confuse the principles with the methods.
100%, 100%. And at the end of the day, having been to lots of different trainers and lots of different modalities too, like I went to, we had a world champion agility trainer come out while I was up in Darwin. Not much to do in Darwin, so yeah, we're going to go. Plus, at the time, the bitch I had was really scratchy. She was a very defensive bitch. And I thought, I've got to just take this dog everywhere and do as much stuff as I can with her, right? But what I find by going to all these different people is top trainers, it doesn't matter what they do, top trainers, there's way more similarity in what they're saying and how they're doing stuff than difference. So, yeah, they're applying it differently, but training is training, and high-level training, and it doesn't change. It really, there's a whole lot more that's similar than different. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, awesome. So what was your evolution then in the last sort of few years of your career leading up to now? How's your role changed, and what's changed in the RAAF in general?
Yeah, so getting leading from what you were saying, post Timor, I mean, it's always learning, right? And I'm still learning now, right? And I still, crazy sponge for knowledge and that sort of stuff. But so I posted to Adelaide for a while. I was only down there for a couple of years. Then I got posted up to the school. So, and I spent quite a few years at the school, teaching on dog course initially, which was interesting. Yeah, it was quite interesting. Fun, a lot of fun. But, I mean, you get quite high standards, and you'd be the same, right, when you're teaching people coming through, because you're thinking, these are the people I'm going to be working with, right? So it's not just about skills they have. You need a particular type of person, right, or particular qualities, right? We want individuality, but there are some qualities that, are inherent in people that, are good in the teams that we work in. So... And I take that role fairly seriously. Like as an NCO, even your troops, you're trying to develop them as well, for us airmen, right? Aviators now, we're aviators now. So, but you're trying to develop that mindset in them as well as the skills to be good at their job. So coming to the school was an eye opener, I guess, because with each generation, you see changes in the people that are coming through. And the reasoning for people coming through, I think, is getting a lot more varied. I think there was a lot more commonality in the group of misfits that were coming through when I was in, right? We all were a little bit obviously different, but the same as well. Whereas now there's a lot more varied people coming into defence. So the school was interesting from that perspective. And I did dog course for a year. I did common skills course for a couple of years. Which was interesting. And then I went to K9 development. So then I was, because we had a lot of APS guys working at K9 development, and still do. So not a lot of structure there. So we put some structure into the training of the dogs, because we had our own breeding program at SFS in the RAAF.
Correct,
And yeah, so from there we do the development work with the dogs, and then from there they go on to basic course or out to return and that sort of stuff. So a lot of dogs and a lot of training that needs to be put in place to get them ready to come on course. So, and I probably spent the next 2 years, 3 years there, I guess. I got made up to sergeant while I was there, so I was senior NCO in charge of K9 development while I was there as well. So, yeah. So
yeah,
that was a great role, and I think we did a lot of good work. We were starting to get some good results, and we had a good link between the school, between the instructors and that sort of stuff. We were starting to get the instructors coming through K9 development before they went out to instruct, which I thought was fairly important, that they were getting a lot of hands-on time with the dogs and learning about training, not just handling their dog, because they may have only had 1 or 2 dogs prior to coming to the school. So they were quite skilled with their dog, with their own dog, but coming in and training other people, I think you need a little bit broader understanding of training. And we were able to get that because they were coming through K9 development, working a lot of dogs. So that helped in that regard. So, and just drawing those links and introducing some of the more modern training ideologies, I guess. As I said, we got the likes of Pat Stewart and that sort of thing to come up and have a chat to people, and just to try and get some clarity, get some direction in people's minds, because when your workload is really high, you tend to just get through what you're getting through, and I think you lose a little bit of focus sometimes on what we're actually trying to do, what we're trying to achieve. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm kind of reading between the lines there. I don't want to get you in trouble because you're obviously still serving, and I've got my own opinions about defence and a bunch of things. But I'm not too savvy on what's going on in the dog world at the moment inside the military. And I'll kind of switch tact a little bit. In terms of deployments later on, or at least recently in your career, has the RAAF done a lot of overseas work? So, for example, were they involved in the Kabul drawdown or anything like that?
They are. Not so much with the dogs though. So dogs aren't going overseas so much. With the RAAF, our dogs aren't, unfortunately. So there is a big transformation going on, Air Force wide. It's the security transformation. So that's affecting a lot the way things are happening on the ground with troops and where dogs fit into that equation and that sort of stuff. So RAAF are very involved in a lot of stuff. Dogs not so much at the moment. So
Yeah, okay. And I guess the way I'm framing that question is because my for the army guys, the focus is always like overseas, Afghan, Iraq, Timor, da 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 da, and that may not be the constant that you guys are thinking about because you've got other priorities as well, right? And that's sort of
yeah,
why I framed it that way, I guess.
yeah. Look, there's certainly the deployment options, and people are going on deployments, but the how that looks for us, and there are a lot of short notice. There's lots of little jobs that are happening, right? People are going away and that sort of stuff. So, look, it's definitely there. Um, um, as I say, where the dogs fit into that, the dogs are still on the board, but I think they have to be prepared to go as a airman or aviator first to do their job. And yeah, look, the deployment options are still there, but it's a lot more, I think, reactive force now. It's like, this is happening. All right, let's get this team together and go and get this job done. So
Yeah, and I mean, given the volatile nature of a few a few conflicts that we've got going on lately, so you've obviously got what do you call it? The Ukraine conflict. We've got Israel Gaza Israel Palestine kicking off. Are you guys getting any sort of information back from those operations that are influencing the way you train or the way you focus on particular things?
look, it's not filtering down to the dog stuff at this
Yeah,
point in time. Um, yeah, so from a logistical point of view, I think that's where a lot of it's coming from, and a training of personnel point of view, I think it's coming to. Not so much with the dogs at the moment. The dogs
yeah.
are definitely a capability, but a lot more focus is going on to personnel at this point in time, I believe.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and it just seems like there's a huge flow-on effect, especially when it comes to logistics and the RAF, because essentially, apart from a small cadre of people that are bombing some baddies, it's a massive logistical effort, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some flow-on effects that will affect you in the way that you rapidly deploy or move your dog around or the type of equipment you use, for example.
Yeah. So security is what, they will always be used for, and detection capability. So securing of our assets, obviously, is always super important. And yeah, essentially that's where we go with that.
Yeah, okay.
Mm.
Now, where you and I initially met, we initially met at your sport club, but when I went out to see you guys at Amberley, what was your role there? Because there was a bit of
Uh,
an Army Air Force mix there, from what I remember, right?
yeah, so look, we always have someone from the army there, because we do the basic course from RAAF SFS, and we also run some of the army. They do their basic train. They do their basic dog course with us as well. So then they go out and do a single service dog course. But their initial basic course is exactly the same and run at the same time. So if there's 16 spots, it might be 8 and 8. It depends on how many people have qualified or been put up for selection for dog course. But yeah, so we always have at least one dog instructor and sometimes an assistant from Army working alongside the guys. So, and that one instructor stays embedded with us, obviously, to help work the dogs. So.
Yeah. And there's a couple of, and because they're part of the listener questions, I'll go into that now because I was going to ask about them anyway. Probably a good natural transition. Let me just give me 2 seconds and I'll get this up because this is something that interests me as well. And it's about the breeding program. So that's been a huge interest to the people asking the questions. So sorry, bear with me while I get this damn thing going. So Ben Bangers, I'll just call him Ben Bangers because I don't know if he wants me to mention his name on here. Ben Bangers wants to know, how did the RAAF breeding program start? Because that's what interests me.
Yeah, right. Well, the breeding program's been going on for a long time before I got in, right? They've been breeding dogs for a long time. So, and I don't want to talk out of school here, but because I haven't been directly involved in, obviously development of the breeding program. But they've been breeding dogs at the RAAF for a very long time. So I think once we started looking at the numbers of dogs that we required for the RAAF, once they identified how many dogs they wanted back in the day, because initially, obviously, they were recruiting dogs off the street, right? That's where they were getting a lot of their dogs from. And then they had a bit of a test phase where they were looking at a few different breeds. I think they looked at Timor and stuff like that for a while back in the day as well. So they ran some pilot programs prior to them commencing breeding. I'd have to look it up when they actually started breeding, but initially it was with German Shepherds. So.
Yeah. And are we talking like 90s, 80s, early 2000s?
Yeah, no, definitely have to be 80s, I reckon. I mean, I should know my history a little bit better than this, but yeah, it's that the breeding program's been running for quite some time. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you mostly have now? You guys mostly running the males?
Yeah. So we were running Shepherds for a long time, and then they started introducing some of the Malinois, and then they were doing some crossbreds. We've had some Dutchies for a while. Now, as far as breeding goes, it's exclusively Malinois.
Oh, so it's just males.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people that are moving to males, and there are still some people and organisations that probably prefer shepherds. Like I know QPS, the Queensland Cops, they love a good shepherd, and they've got a sprinkling of males in there. Like you personally, any particular preference for one over the other?
Look, they're both different, and there's pros and cons to both. I'm currently running a shepherd puppy as well, so I've got 2 males at home and a German shepherd. I'm involved in our organisation now. Or my club is now a member of the Working German Shepherd Association. So flying the flag, running a German Shepherd to do sport with, and they're very different. Hey, so I think the shepherds are naturally more inclined to track better. Don't get me wrong, I love a Malinois, and my Malinois track, very, very well, but they're different. They're different dogs, and training them is different. And I think the shepherds are slower to develop in a lot of ways. So there's the time factor there. And obviously I think essentially we were getting a much higher pass rate with the Malinois, which is why they started cutting away the shepherds. It comes down to a numbers game when you're dealing with a lot of dogs, and far fewer health issues with the Malinois as opposed to the German Shepherds. And that could be because the kennel environment is quite harsh for dogs. It's not, it's not individualised. And obviously a lot of our bases are up in the top end of Australia where, you've got heat and all that sort of stuff to deal with. So
Yeah.
I think they were all considerations. So preferences, look, as I said, pros and cons. Genetically, I think the German Shepherds have naturally, they're more inclined to have a better grip, natural, full, hard grip. But the Malinois have that fight drive, right? They've got that aggression and that tenacity, and they're not gonna throw in the towel, right? Whereas a Shepherd is more likely to, I'm just gonna chill out over here for a while. I'll be back soon. The Malinois don't do that. They literally will work till they die. So, um, generally speaking, right? There's generally speaking.
Yeah. No, that's a good distinction. I like that because when I asked the same or a similar question to Pat, you heard that he went down the rabbit warren when it came to like breeding and this dog family versus that one, and I've never been like a breeding guy. Like I've got a few mates that are into that sort of stuff, and they're like, "Oh, this is X von Zeus crossed with blah blah blah," and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Shepherds
and
are bigger."
it's hard. I mean, I've done a few litters, and I've got another one that's coming up shortly, and but I breed for me. Like if I do a litter, it's because I'm looking for a dog for myself. Um, because it's just too hard, right? There are people that are doing it far better than me, sitting there doing the matching up of phenotype, genotype, and all that sort of stuff, and looking back through bloodlines and all that sort of thing. And then you've got the whole other aspect, depending on where the dogs come from overseas, as to how accurate that paperwork is anyway. So um, and there's lots of people that know that, but they know the dogs, right? They've worked all the dogs in the last couple of generations, so they're vouching for the dog, not for what's on paper. So there's a lot of that sort of knowledge that you kind of need to have, I think, if you're going to be breeding a lot of dogs or any dogs, right? So if I use a dog, it's a dog I know. I'll always use at least one dog that I know, and highly recommended other dogs. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Mm.
I've got another one from Ben. Uh, Sorry, he's got a bunch of questions on the one thing, so I've got to like filter through it. Um, so he's asking about how you got into IGP because I haven't asked that question yet. That's good. And then how does IGP benefit your work training, like your professional work training?
Yeah, sure. So I actually got into IGP because I wanted to get better at my job, right? So I wanted to be a better trainer. So I went to an IGP trial and saw the work they were doing, and that was pretty impressive to me at the time. Now I look back at it and I think, we can still do better, but it was that's why I got into it, right? And there were lots more avenues of trainers and good trainers, and there were lots of people coming from overseas doing seminars and that sort of stuff. So I got into it initially to become better at my job. I wanted to be a
Yeah,
better trainer. So, and having done training before, but I hadn't done so much of the bite stuff, obviously, and aggression work and that sort of thing. So that's what I wanted to passionately learn more about. And so, yeah, that's initially why I got involved.
yeah.
Yeah.
Any particular reason you went IGP over like I don't know PSA or any other different acronym or dog sports that I'm
Yeah,
not all
so
overly familiar with?
interesting. It's interesting because I'm actually slanting off with one of my dogs into a different direction now. But so I think Ben was probably the influence in the beginning, right? Because he
Yep.
was a bit involved in the sport dogs,
Oh, he's sick
and
for it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So and I think he may have been a helper at the trial that I went down to. It was down in Sydney. Um, and so yeah, it was on his sort of come down, have a look at this. And what fell on from that was a recommendation to a breeder for me to get my first Malinois outside of work. Um, and yeah, that's how that journey sort of started. So, but now, why did I choose IGP? Yeah, probably because of that, and because there just seemed to be so much attention to detail on the details, right? So on the exercises were a lot relative in the obedience work. And to me, obedience I look at now, it's really not just about teaching fancy tricks. It's about getting that much more intricate communication, line of communication with your dog. That's good obedience to me is that, right? Um, so it wasn't that aspect of it. It was the bite stuff and the tracking stuff as well, because I didn't feel, even though I'd always done well with my dog's tracking, at work, I could never confidently tell you why, right, or what was going on. I could kind of post-process and go, yeah, this happened, but I didn't feel I had a very solid understanding of what was going on, and that took me quite a while. In fact, it wasn't until I got to Timor I really kind of broke that apart and felt coming back from there that I understood tracking a little bit more, and continued to work on that until I went to Germany and did some training with a guy over there, and that's when I came back and went, yeah, now I think I really understand a lot more. So yeah,
Yeah. And how do
constant.
you do your tracking? Like what's the crossover between your IGP tracking and then your work tracking, for example?
And I say this to everybody about everything, about every aspect. I start all dogs with the same, exactly the same, right? But it's going to be different for the different dogs and different applications. So I've been influenced a lot. So BART system, where the initial scent pad stuff. I use that a little bit. But then I think Canute Fox, who I went and trained with in Germany, and I brought him out here a few times, his method is probably the one I most consistently go back to. I've since done Dick Style as well, and I like the principles about that and the small articles and things like that, which I use a lot. My male, he does these tiny little articles that I can't even see if I haven't got my glasses on. But so little aspects from that. But I think the main method I'm using and what I started this shepherd with was a scent pad. So get the dog indicating the scent pad first and rewarding that behaviour. And then I am using food on the track, but I'm using it every few footsteps. So, and in my thinking, I don't want the dog, I'm not luring the dog up the track. I'm rewarding the correct behaviours. So he'll sniff a footprint. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. He's already showing me good behaviours, and then bang, oh, there's something there. So the dog learns himself. His behaviour is he's being rewarded from his behaviour, not being lured up the track. Because I had a big issue with using lots of food on the track. I'm like, how do I know they're not just following food, right? So, and then I cut the food away quite early. But then it's going to depend on the dog. Sometimes don't have the food drive. Sometimes the ground's covered in ants, right? Sometimes lots of things. So I think I'm leaning kind of between that Canute's method and the Dick style with the articles. So always I'll have an article on the track now, which I've pre-trained. And so then to me, that's a logical end on the track, right? So the dog, even if that's all they're doing, that they're searching for the article, they learn soon enough that by following the footsteps, that's where the article's going to be. And the article's super valuable to them, so I'm always going to get a reliable indication on the article. So,
Yeah, because when I was doing that development work with like Django and Cyrus and a couple of dogs, I was big on the Dick Stall method, Dick Stall.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
really enjoyed it, and I definitely fucked it up initially. My dogs were just going visual because my article wasn't small enough, but I thought it was a really clear, simple, easy one to follow with easy progressions once you get over a few of the a few of the simple mistakes.
yeah, yeah. And I think it is, but then like everything, you have to be able to problem solve, because then you get dogs that are just fast tracking to the article, right? And because um, yes, obviously in sport, I need them to be quite specific and stylized in what they're doing, not just stylized, but quite specific in the behaviors that they're showing me. But in the beginning, even with the working dogs, because I think if we put that foundation in right, then you've always got something to go back to. So if I'm running a dog and I'm following someone that jumped a fence, right, I'm going to let my dog follow it however they can. But if I've trained them, a Malinois, if I haven't initially trained them to put their nose on the ground, they're not going to do it, right? They're not going to come back to that footstep stuff. Whereas initially they're not going to either, right? If they come to a pool scent and there's fresh scent and there's some adrenaline in it, the dog's just going to be hunting, right? But when they lose odor, if they've been trained to ground scent, they bring themselves back to ground scent, right? Or I can at least come back to the last known point and restart the dog. And they've got that skill. But if they haven't learnt that skill in the beginning, Buckley's, right? And that's how we initially trained the dogs. It was, prey drive maximizer and the Malinois just didn't want to put their nose on the ground, right? I got really fit chasing my dog, tracking. He'd always won the person because he was a great hunter, but tracking, not so much. So, but having said that, and I'm still passionate about the IGP stuff, and I love it for the systematic way of training. All the phases in all dogs, and I use that with all the dogs that I work. But I'm veering my big dog. I'm probably leaning more towards the PSA stuff now with him, and which is really fun. Hey, it's a heap of fun, and it's not. There's just it's opened up a whole big world, right? There's a whole lot more distractions and a whole lot more stuff to train. So, which I'm finding really exciting. And then a lot of people are sort of coming in and trying to jump on that PSA thing too, right? And I'm encouraging people to do that, but I'm also encouraging them to put in that basic training to start with, right? Because like with everything, you'll get through the first couple of lessons, the first couple of stages quite easily because, you don't need that great degree of control. But I think if you've got a dog that's worthy of reaching the high level in anything, sport, work, whatever, they need to have a lot of character. They need to have a lot of strength in them, but you also need to have a lot of control on them, right? So you need to have that really good relationship. And you do that back here with your foundation stuff. And then as you come up through the levels, as the drive comes up, as the distractions come up, as all of that stuff comes up, then you can put your consequence up a little bit, but your relationship, your communication is really strong. Your trust, your dog's trust in you is really strong. And I think if you don't pay attention and get that basic work in the beginning, that when you get to the higher levels, it all starts falling apart. And there's only so much you can pull together with strong equipment and, harsh corrections and all that sort of stuff. And then you're going to lose, it's all going to fall out somewhere else because your dog doesn't trust you anymore. Or they'll only do it conditionally, like when they know that you can reach them and put the consequence on them and things like that, So I'd say, yeah, definitely go the PSA route if that's what you want to do. But all of the things you need at the high level, you're going to get in your basic, working towards your initial IGP stuff. So, and people argue about the style of biting is a little bit different. Pull back as opposed to a punch in, and we can all sit there and argue about all that sort of stuff for a long time. But for me, it's about the attitude, the mindset of the dog when we're doing stuff, not so much the how they're doing it, although the how is super important, but it's what they're thinking and feeling at the time when they're doing it, And always in the protection stuff, it doesn't matter whether you're doing IGP or PSA or work dog. Those dogs must always think they're going to win every fight, and they must want to stay in the fight and enjoy the fight. So that's what I'm more worried about, not the pulling back or the punching in, right? It's the going in and being confident enough that they can dominate, and their behaviour, by them being strong, they can overcome stuff. And the way through an issue is, the way, if people are putting pressure on them, the way through that is to give more pressure, So that's more important to me. But yeah, PSA, I'm getting a bit excited about just because it's
I could see.
there's challenges in doing a set routine, which the IGP is. But I think the PSA is a little bit more aligned to real world issues because it's not scripted, right? Once you get up to the second, third levels, it's not scripted, and there's no real limits. There's some parameters around the distractions and the pressure that they can put on your dog, but it's not scripted. So I think you genuinely have to have a dog that can withstand quite a bit of pressure and have a bit of strength of character to get through that. So,
Yeah. The way I sort of tried to describe, summarize it to Pat was it sounds like it's a kind of like the CrossFit of the dog sport world. Like you rock up and it's like, oh fuck, what's today's WOD? It's biting in a car with your handler has a blindfold or some shit. So you've got to have a good base level understanding, control, like you said, character, etc., in order to tackle a whole bunch of potential different obstacles and challenges. So, did you ever have any time where your like say your IGP stuff got in the way of your work stuff at all?
Whoa, got in the
Excuse me.
way of. Look,
Yeah, or
I
you had to sort of reconcile, like, oh shit, maybe this is more of an IGP thing versus a work thing.
more in other people's opinions, I think. And I think that was, and I still get it a little bit, oh yeah, go to Cheryl if you want to work on your obedience, or, if you want to do sports stuff, go to Cheryl, so
Yeah,
that sort of attitude from people, which, that's, but from my perspective, I don't think so, because I'm always surrounded, and I make sure I'm surrounded by people that, um, I'm never working in isolation, right? So, and I like to have a very collaborative environment when I'm working in training. I'm not a dictator, so we're briefing and we're debriefing and we're making sure that the situations are hitting the marks that we want to hit. So, yeah, I might do things a little bit differently with stuff. So as I say, we start training the same, but as we go on to application of stuff and specifics of things, they're always going to be different with whatever we're doing, work dogs, security dogs, it's always going to be a little bit different. So it's just being quite mindful of what the actual end behaviour is that we want. So
yeah, that principles versus rules sort of thing.
mm.
Um, I've got one more question here, and then I've got a final couple of questions that I'm just going to start introducing now. So Daniel Ivan, 94, wants to know, would you join today's RAAF, and would you join with a young family?
The family one's interesting because I kind of met my partner since I've been in, and it's an Insta family. So, and that definitely
What? Sorry.
Insta family. Yeah, so he had kids previously. So
Oh, sorry, gotcha.
yeah. So, and so that's definitely a different dynamic, having family involved. Fortunately, as I say, my partner's in the RAAF as well. So, would I join in that situation? And look, that's an interesting question. Today's RAAF, today as in today, right now, I don't think so. I'd probably be more inclined to jump into the army, I think, if I was going to go defence. I think, and that's kind of where I was aiming initially anyway. It was just the direct entry with the dogs that led me into the RAAF. With the family, it's got to depend on your whole family dynamic, right? Because just the nature of defence is the nature of defence, and a partner and I saying that to each other a lot, right? Because there's always, like, we're in a high ready squadron at the moment, right? So basically short notice to move, something kicks off, it's like you've got to be ready to get back. If you're not close to home, you got to get back and be ready to get to base and be on a plane somewhere. So and we make plans. It's like, oh, but what if this happens? It's like, well, this is just what we do, right? It's how it is. But there's a little bit more to deal with the kids, right? They get sick, they get suspended from school, they have stuff to do and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot to factor in. So yeah, it's possible. Would I? Yeah, as I say, I think I'd join the army at the moment. If I had right now, I was looking at a situation. Would I join RAAF? Probably not, but simply because of I want to be in the role that I'm in. Right. So yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. No, it's a fair answer because you're right. It's a complex one, right? You're like, what the fuck? I don't know. I don't know much about your family. You're like, big family, small family. Like, what do you want to do? You want to go overseas, or you just want to do stuff with dogs? So yeah, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I got three last questions. So what are your future aspirations, whether it's in defence or out of defence?
Yeah, look, see that's hard too. I don't know.
Yeah.
As far as in defence, I'm still a little bit undecided because, as I say, the security transformation that's happening is going to have a big bearing on what it looks like on the ground, what my role even now looks like on the ground. It's already quite clear that it's going to change. So, as far as outside defence, look, I'm always looking at competing at a really high level. I'm pretty busy with sport dog stuff and rolling in some of the PSA guys as well into my training at the moment. we bring trainers in from overseas quite a bit. We've got I've got my helper coming over. Actually, he'll be here in a few days. So we do some protection dog training for a few weeks, and then he'll come back next year, and we'll do another few workshops and a trial. And then we've got our world champion IGP trainer coming over in January. And then tying with that, we've got some of the PSA guys coming up for that workshop. So we'll do a bit of a PSA sort of training. So essentially, basically, I'm just looking at keeping on going with training dogs and trying to give opportunities to people to train with good trainers. I'd like to say that I was going to sort of, hang a shingle and just stay home and work dogs and stuff, but I don't think I have that. I don't think I'm very good at self-promotion, and I'm way better at dogs than I am with people, and I think you need to be really good at people to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, if you ever need any lessons in self-promotion, hey.
Yeah, cool.
That's the ego-driven Tom Brown show. Nice joke. So what's your favourite piece of canine gear and why?
Favourite piece of canine gear? Wow. So I'm a big person that will always say, if you need a certain piece of equipment on your dog, then you probably haven't trained him right. But having said that, look, I really like, I just like good, functional, long-lasting equipment, right? So I've got so much stuff, but what do I actually use? What do I actually need? I always run dogs in harness, right, when I'm doing my initial character work. So I like a good harness, and I like leads. Leads, I'm a bit specific about leads. For specific things. So I like leads without handles, obviously, because, if we're doing drop lead stuff and things like that. Tracking leads, it's really hard to find good tracking leads that don't pick up the moisture when you're running through the wet weather and the prickles and stuff. But then, any of those synthetic ones are hard. So, yeah, good gear.
I think you pretty much answered the question. Like a good sturdy harness for the majority of the work you do, and then like a half decent lead that can, like you said, not pick up a whole bunch of moisture and drag a whole bunch of shit down the track, but also
and
be strong
harnesses
enough to sort of. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, harnesses are really important because like, for example, the trainer I've got coming out this weekend, Ronnie. He's an honorary Australian, right? He'd be here permanently if he could. He loves the country, but workaholic, right? So we'll run maybe anywhere from 15 to 20 dogs. We try and cut it down to around 15 dogs, but we run them through at least 3 times a day every session. And we do lots of line work. So all the dogs will start out with a harness on, right? And me or one of the other guys will be behind them with lines, controlling them. And the amount of people that have dogs, harnesses that are just not suitable, or they don't fit properly, or that don't have good fittings on them, because it's fairly important. I certainly don't want to be getting my helper, chewed. So if, you've got things that are failing on the harness or the lead, that can be quite detrimental. And he's sitting there, getting him all revved up and quite angry at him. If a piece of equipment fails, then that's not so good, right? So yeah,
Correct.
I think whatever you've got just needs to be super good quality, right? So
Yeah, gotcha. Awesome. All right, and last question. Any advice for the next generation of canine handlers and trainers?
Look, I think you need to keep learning. Never think you know it all, but try and get a more holistic view, right? I get lots of people come through that, they only want to train in a specific area, and that's fine. But I think you need to look at the whole gamut of what a dog is. If you just want to be a pet dog trainer, then fine. But if you want to be a military working dog handler, you've got to understand all the drives and all of everything that a dog brings to the table. And you need to look at it from all aspects. If you want to train a protection dog, or you want to train a bite dog, you need to take bites. You need to see what they look like from the other side, because you learn so much about your dog. from the other side, the facial expressions, the nuances and all that sort of stuff. There's so much. And I think you need to, and I do it with even my sport dog people, right? I get them in front of their dogs, at least with a wedge or something, right? Just to learn about, and the mechanics of biting and the mechanics of catching dogs and how dogs move and all that sort of stuff. So I think everybody just needs to get a really holistic view. And when you get that view, things start making more sense, right? You get a much better understanding of the psychology behind stuff. So you have to widen the view though and see it all. Don't just look at it from your perspective. Look at it from the dog's perspective, and the decoy's perspective. So,
Yeah, I like that. That was good. Yeah, and you're right. Having that, maybe emotional intelligence isn't the right word, but having that empathy to understand what the dog's going through, what the decoy's going through, so that you can have a better appreciation of what you're actually about to achieve and what you're about to do.
And you understand more how you can influence it, right? So, and a lot of people look at decoys and they're standing there, they're cracking whips, and they're getting all this activity out of dogs, right? And that's good, in some situations. But I think a lot of real development work, it's quite fine. It's quite, I like doing a lot of the baby dogs and the young dogs myself, or the newer dogs, because it's a facial expression sometimes, it's the way you hold your mouth, it's your breathing, right, that's going to change, and their expression. And if you reward the right attempt, the right attitude at the right moment, that can just be that can be the start of the catalyst of them actually figuring out that they are quite powerful, that their behavior is, it's not always. I don't like the attitude of getting out and testing a dog every time, right? I don't want to test how strong a dog is. The dogs that come out and are all, activity, not necessarily strong dogs, right? They're just super active dogs. And I really want to train strong dogs and develop strong dogs. And I think we do that by teaching them that they can control the situation. So I want the dog to go from being defensive, which comes from a stress response, right? They're a little bit, they want to make you go away, right? They don't like you in their zone. They, go away, to defense. So from defense to defense. And that's what I like to try and do with the dogs, to teach them that, they're a little bit nervous now, but their reaction creates a behaviour, and then they get a little bit more confident, and then they learn, then they become quite strong, and they control the situation. Then they're a lot more reliable, because if they're defensive, they're not reliable. So, yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Well, Cheryl, that's us wrapped up.
Cheers. Well, thanks for the chat. I don't think I've talked about myself that long, or about dogs that long, without getting told to shut up for a while, so that's good.
No, it was a good chat, and I think that amount of time is I'm starting to get better at the sort of time that I do the podcast. I'm sure it's easy to fatigue as a guest, as a listener, and as a host and stuff over 2-3 hour podcasts. So I think this is a good time. It was a good chat. We went through a lot of stuff in your career and all through training, and I had a great little time.
Cool.
So
awesome.
Thank you very much for coming on and being my first first active Australian Defence Force member on the podcast.
No worries. Thanks for the invitation.
No worries, Cheryl. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Don't hang up.
Okay.
Gotcha.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of the Origin K9 podcast. Tune in next week for another episode. In the meantime, go to origink9.com, check out our safe, innovative and built-for-purpose canine equipment.